So the one thing that I have neglected to do on this channel up until now has been react content. And that's not like out of any malice toward people who do react content or anything. I've just always found react content to be a tad lazy. Even when it's well done, even when like most of the content of the video is the reaction instead of just sitting back and watching the video play, you know, there's a lot of transformativeness to it. However, in order to do this video somewhat proper, I feel like I have to show you the video that I got the ideas from, in order to just kind of put everything forward. Now, this video was posted by Johnny Rage, and I'm just gonna get this out of the way right now. Johnny Rage and I are homies. Okay, Johnny Rage and I are homies. We're mutuals on Twitter. This is them messaging me about this video. Now, I did give them like a little basic rundown of what I thought about it, and then they had a counterpoint, which I'm not going to get into all of that, but the reason I'm showing you guys this is because I know that somebody, I know how fan bases are. Someone is going to see my responses because I'm going to have disagreements here, and someone is going to see my responses and they're going to be a fan of Johnny and they're going to try to start some shit. Johnny and I are homies. Okay, so shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear no bullshit. Okay, I don't want to hear about how I'm stealing Johnny's content or I'm being an asshole or Johnny's a better streamer or YouTuber than me or what the fuck ever. Okay, we're homies, and he actively asked me for my thoughts on this, and this is the best way that I feel like I can do it with my current workload in content creation. And I also thought that this video does provide an interesting discussion piece. As with any respectable reaction type content, you will find the link to this video in the description below. So please, please, please go support Johnny. I think Johnny is legitimately one of the funniest dudes in the community. He's the king of rage baiting, and it is criminal that he only has 541 subscribers. So if I could do anything with my channel, I would like to bolster the people who deserve it, and Johnny definitely deserves it. So let's go ahead and get into this video and see what Johnny has to say. And I'm also running off 3 hours of sleep, but that's not the point.
Balance in Dead by Daylight. Everybody's talking about it. Big content creators base their entire brands off of critiquing it in one way or another. It's seemingly the only thing that people can talk about. Balance talk is in the comment section.
Yes, this is the first point that Johnny that I agree with Johnny with. There's going to be other points, but I also think that the reason all anybody can ever talk about is balance is because it's a PvP game, and if you look at analytics for videos, for mine specifically, obviously I don't have the back end to people like Otts or Scott Juns or anybody else's like that, but for my videos specifically, the videos that talk about balance, and more specifically the videos that talk about balance in a negative light, are the ones that outperform everything else, right? They outperform concepts, they outperform news, they outperform literally, if you praise anything about the game, if you're like, hey, behavior did a good job here, literally all of that is outperformed by negative balance talking points. So if you are making a video bitching about something, if you're making a video complaining about something, that is going to outdo everything else in the algorithm. And again, specifically with balance, if it is pertaining to balance, that outdoes everything else in the algorithm. But that is because it's a PvP game. I don't think Johnny is like saying this in malice, right? I don't think he's like being like, oh, everybody only talks about balance, like what a bunch of idiots. Like, he's not doing that, obviously. I think that you know, this is a point to bring up, that balance is something that most people talk about in PvP games. So yeah.
Of videos, TikToks, tweets, etc. And one very important thing that's very peculiar about Dead by Daylight, though, is that nobody can agree on what balance actually is. Well, that's a big problem. I myself have spoken with many other content creators. Collectively, we have around 20,000 hours in the game when we talk about the Dead by Daylight in general, and I can tell you that there is no one cogent narrative that anyone can agree upon about what the root issue of Dead by Daylight actually is.
Yes, and I'm making a full video on this. It'll probably come out after this video. I believe personally that the root cause of Dead by Daylight's issues is not to do with the game itself, but to do with the way that the community approaches the game. And the reason I say that is, like I said, I have a full video coming out about that soon, but the reason that I say that is because the community, the DBD community specifically, might just be the most entitled gaming community I have ever witnessed in my entire life. And you guys are actually going to see a video before this one that's titled The DBD Community is Miserable and It's Affecting Me, where I go in depth about how the DBD community's entitlement leads to their misery, and then they use that misery and try to spread it to other people, which causes, if you're a content creator in this space, it can cause severe mental health issues where you're just every fucking day is just a non-stop, whether it's in the game, with the community on Twitter, Reddit, TikTok, the YouTube comment section, whatever. It's just a non-stop barrage of people wanting any and everything to go their way. As far as nobody being able to agree on what constitutes proper balance, that's just a human error. People take their own experiences and they try to take what they don't like and call that bad balancing as a way to back up their own, as a way to back up their points, right? They'll take something like, okay, so for example, I hate the perk Boil Over. It's one of the most annoying goddamn perks. Even if it doesn't prevent the unhook, I just hate how it does like 5 fucking things at one time, and I think it's just stupid. But the perk is neither unhealthy for the game nor imbalanced. But if I was a jackass, which some people argue I am, I would be like, oh, well, the Boil Over is a bad perk. It's imbalanced because it has a bunch of different effects, and I think that's not something that one you know what, you see what I'm saying?
So I'm going to address the core issue of what Dead by Daylight actually is, which is the fact that it's 2 games stitched together to make one. Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical game, and asymmetrical games can literally never be balanced.
So this is actually the part where I massively disagree to a minor extent. The thing is that while the thing is that no game can ever be balanced. This is a myth, the myth of balancing, where people think that there is this utopia where their favorite video game, right, whatever it is, Apex, Overwatch, Valorant, Fortnite, Dead by Daylight, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, whatever your game of choice is, whatever your PvP game of choice is, there is this idea in people's heads that there's a perfect world where perfect balance is obtainable, and it just isn't. Especially the longer a game's lifespan, the harder it becomes to balance as power creep sets in and more stuff begins to be added. You're just never going to achieve a world where everything in the game is equally viable. And I promise you don't want that anyway, because in a world where everything is equally viable, everything's gonna do the same thing. Because in order for balance to be achieved, everything has to have an equal level of power versus counterplay, and the power that things have to accomplish the goal they need to in the same way that everything else does. So for example, in In Dead by Daylight, the goal of the survivors is to repair gens and stay alive long enough for the gens to be repaired, right? So in order for perfect balance on the survivor side to happen, every single perk needs to either speed the gens up or make the survivor live for far too fucking long, right? And then on the killer side, the goal is to patrol the gens and kill the survivors. So in a perfect balanced world, every single perk would slow the gens down and help you catch the survivors faster. And so then we lose out on creative stuff like Blood Warden, and this is what happens when you try to film a video off the dome at 3 a.m. But the more creative stuff will eventually will disappear, right? We wouldn't have dissolution. We wouldn't have the deception, right? We wouldn't have Pebble. We wouldn't have like all of these creative perks that do interesting things, because there's no way to make those viable, right? There's no way to make those interesting and useful without taking away their creativity. Every single game has to have things that are creative and fun, along with stuff that does the job well. Now, I don't think that Johnny is referring to perfect balance here, but it is worth noting that this idea of balance, the myth of balance as it were, is something that I feel like a lot of people don't fully grasp when they're talking about balancing, is that it is impossible for any game to be perfectly balanced. And when I brought this up, Johnny did mention that while not every game does balance well, he feels that DBD does it the worst. And that is, in my opinion, probably true. Unfortunately, I don't play any other Asym games, so I don't know if that is a result of Dead by Daylight itself, or if that is a result of Asym games, because the title of this video is indeed The Fate of All Asyms, so this just might be an asymmetrical problem that I'm not aware of as someone whose only asymmetrical experience is in Dead by Daylight. And so that's a conversation I can't have, is whether or not Dead by Daylight does it the worst. I know of the games I've played, it does it the worst, but I think that's inherent to the Asym genre, because like Johnny is saying here, you've got two different sides with two different goals, which makes balancing extremely hard. But the idea of balance into counterbalance is, the idea of power into counterplay to that power does exist and is well done inside the game. I think perks like Devour Hope, Adrenaline, Pain Resonance are all perks that have decent power levels with decent counterplays, and are also good at doing things like rewarding you for doing your job. Some people will argue with me that old adrenaline, because I am talking about old adrenaline, pre-nerf adrenaline, wasn't balanced because of being able to be healed off the hook. But I always said that if they're ever in a situation where the adrenaline is healing them off the hook, a lot of shit had to happen for them to get to that point. Current Pain Resonance can only proc 4 times, and if you and the other survivors are splitting up on gens like you're supposed to be doing, then it actually doesn't do as much as you would like it to do. So it's still a powerful effect that can be played by just playing the game properly and playing it to a better level. Oh, but solo queue. Listen, you cannot balance games around the lower skill tiers of the game, right? You cannot balance games around the lower skill tiers of the game, because then the game becomes miserable to play. And I say this as somebody who has witnessed game balancing happen around the lower tiers. So I used to play this MMO called Elsword, and I was actually a high-ranking PvP player during my Elsword days. I was in the SS rank. I was in the highest rank you could possibly get. And when they started balancing things, they started balancing the PvP around basically being noob friendly. They noob-proofed the PvP. the game became fucking miserable, because now everything was just about spamming abilities as opposed to comboing abilities and understanding how you were supposed to set up your attacks. Everything was about spam. It was about dumping everything into the highest power attack you could, because they were all easy and cheap to use, and it just became a miserable experience at the higher level because everything at the lower level had basically been child-proofed, and that is not a way to balance games. So you can't balance things around the lowest skill level, because otherwise you're going to create a massive problem at the highest skill level. If you start noob proofing everything, then it makes everything just a worst experience, because then there's no separation between the lower and higher tiers. And the reason that becomes a problem is because in order to make it easier for the lower tiers, you have to make things so easy that they become abusable. It's not an elitism thing, it's the point that if things become so easy they're abusable, then you already have an issue. Also, I'm gonna listen to this in 2x speed because my ADHD allows me to do that. So if you have trouble keeping up, I'm sorry. But yeah.
Ever. You have the survivor role, and then you have the killer role. They play fundamentally very, very differently. They have completely different objectives, and then ways to carry out those objectives. Perks affect them both very differently. The in-game mechanics affect them both extremely differently. They are not playing the same game at all in any capacity, and the differences between them only get greater the more complicated a killer's power can be, and the game used to have some really complicated killers. The way that killer and survivor experience Dead by Daylight is completely different. They don't experience items the same way, they don't experience perks or in-game mechanics in the same way. Getting stunned or blinded or decisively struck is a uniquely only killer experience that is separate from survivor. Their goals are different. The survivors have to sit on generators for 90 seconds, while the killer has to hunt them down and try and outsmart and outstop them and stop them from completing their objective through whatever means. On a fundamental level, the games are very different. You're playing two different games. Dead by Daylight is one of the only games where you can play better than the other side and still lose. And that feeling sucks, by the way. We'll get to that in a bit.
This is true. This is probably the truest thing in this entire video. I absolutely agree with this point to a fundamental level. I say it often in my streams. People can attest to this. I say it very often in my streams where I'm like, oh, that's great. They won that chase, or they made that chase last so long because they happen to exist in this particular area. Things like Garden of Joy's main building, or Gideon's meat plant and stuff like that is, those are just two of like many examples, by the way. But there's just certain maps in this game where you can play your fucking heart out. You can do everything correctly and still lose the game, just because of the inherent way that the game is built, and just because of the inherent things like, so for example, Gideon's meat plant's a great example. I hate Gideon's meat plant. To me, personally, Gideon's meat plant is the worst map in the game. Maybe Leary's is slightly worse than it, but Gideon's meat plant is the worst to me. Not because it's the most powerful survivor-sided map in the game, but because it is inherently boring for both sides. You, as the survivor, just need to run and pre-drop every fucking pallet. If you just run and pre-drop every fucking pallet on the map, every fucking pallet is safe, and you can extend chases not into 60 seconds, not into 90 seconds, but into multiple minutes by literally just existing in the correct rooms on the correct parts of the map. And unfortunately, that is most of the map. And so because of that, because of the way that that is built, it is such a problem that it is such a problem that you can literally be the best killer main in the world, and you will still have survivors outrun you just because they have a billion pallets at their disposal. And that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when you do everything correctly and still lose. I often talk about the reason I hate playing Survivor is the feeling of helplessness. That no matter what I do, no matter how well I run the killer, no matter how well my pathing is, no matter how much knowledge I have, I am still overtly dependent on 3 other fucking orangutans trying to work out whether or not they should touch the only objective they have. it's not a fun time. It's not an interesting time. It's also not a good time whenever you're up against a killer that you don't know how to play against. It's also not a good fucking time whenever you fucking do all these fancy techniques and you get out of it and you think you're gonna get away, and then all of a sudden the killer's on your ass anyway, because, I mean, of course they fucking are. You're on rotten fields. There's nothing else for you there. But the same thing happens on Killer, where you play your brains out, you play your fucking mind out, you do your absolute best to get through everything, and you still just lose because there's 50 million gen speed perks and Commodious Toolbox and BNP, and you've got 2 viable slowdown perks nowadays, and if you run more than 1 slowdown, you're considered a sweaty killer, and God forbid you slug someone for 2.5 seconds, because then you'll never hear the fucking end of it. And so, like, you play to your heart's content and try your best and play the game how it's supposed to be played, only to be outdone by just people existing with certain things. That doesn't feel good. Unfortunately, that is a byproduct of strategy games when both sides have different tools. So TCGs is something I bring up a lot. I have a long history with, fucking Yugi Moto's back there. I've been playing TCGs since like, I was like 6 or 7 years old. Okay. So I've played Yu-Gi-Oh! I played Magic the Gathering. I played Hearthstone. I played, there was a World of Warcraft TCG at one point. I played that. There was like some Heroes Blitz type of thing. I played that. Pokemon. I played that. Like, I've been in TCGs, and there is there's no worse feeling in TCGs than you being able to outplay your opponent, but because they have a certain card or they have a certain group of cards, you just inherently lose the fucking game. And this is why I compare DBD to TCGs so often.
Okay, well, what does that have to do with balance? Well, balance by definition is when a force has a counterforce. For something to be balanced, it needs to affect all players equally.
Correct.
This is impossible for Dead by Daylight to ever achieve balance because no change can ever affect both killer and survivor equally. It never.
And this is where I fundamentally disagree. Because like I said, there are things in the game like Devour, like Pain Res, like Adrenaline that do have proper force and counter force measures applied. Can the game as a whole do that? No, I don't think so. But it is possible to kind of do it. So it's really a question. It's not a question of is it possible? It's a question of, is it possible for the whole game? It is possible. It is not possible for the whole game. And this is where Johnny disagrees with me. He said he wanted me to rethink my position. Let me see if I can actually read his message here. I would encourage you to maybe think about point 1 again, which is where I said about balance, and think about those perks and their effect on the overall greater meta and how useful they truly are against good teams where you can't even get any hook stages. And balance might not be 100% possible all the time, but there's certainly games that have done a damn good job figuring out how to make them more balanced. DBD is probably the worst. Again, this is something that I don't know whether or not that applies to DBD just as a game or as to ASIMs as a whole. But as far as like the perks that I mentioned, he said you can't even get any hook stages. I get that, but that's not a problem with those perks. That's a problem with things like map design, right? Like that's a problem with things like map design or even perks that outdo those perks. I still think those perks are balanced, but what makes it more of a difficult conversation is the inherent way the game is set up. So they can seem like they're not balanced because there are certain other aspects of the game outside of those things that create an imbalance. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I feel like I'm just kind of yapping, but I'm hope that I'm making sense.
Ever can. Dead by Daylight is 2 games stitched together like some weird ungodly Frankenstein kind of, ironically enough, type of game. Alright, so now you're probably asking, okay, if Dead by Daylight can't have balance, and it can, then what is everyone talking about when they mention balance? What's my favorite YouTuber, streamer, TikToker, whatever? What are they talking about when they say the word balance? What are they actually trying to say? And the answer is simple. It's fun. Balance equals fun. Streamers, TikTokers, YouTubers, when they say balance, what they really mean is fun. Because balance in Dead by Daylight is conceptually impossible, we have replaced the concept with the word fun. When we say Blight was overpowered, Billy is overpowered, Nurse is broken, this is overtuned, it really just means this isn't very fun for me, and that's it.
I agree and disagree here. I think that people have not replaced the idea of balance with fun, but that balance inherently means fun no matter what, right? Because when you're talking about things that when you're talking about balance, you're talking about things that that feel good to play against, right? That is what balance is in a sense. It's not just a force and a counter force like we talked about earlier, although it is. It's also making sure that that force and counter force is put together equally so that they feel good to play against, or at the very least, they feel not helpless to play against, and that is part of having fun in a PvP game. PvP games, much like the difficulty in any game, is going to be considered good if you feel like you are in control of your losses. That's the best way for me to put it, right? So for example, in something like Bloodborne, the deaths that you incur are your fault, and it is a challenge to climb above and overcome. The difficulty of Bloodborne is a fair difficulty because you have to overcome it as the player. There's nothing in the game that's bullshit or unfair or anything like that. It is all about your skill level in the game that allows you to overcome those difficulties. However, in something like Borderlands, which I'm actually doing a review of and I hope is out before this video gets released, in something like Borderlands, part of the difficulty is an RNG factor in the accuracy stat of the guns. And that's not fun because the only thing in my control is to go and grind myself stupid to try and overlevel myself so that the shit accuracy stat and the RNG of the accuracy stat doesn't affect me as much, and the things that I'm pointing my gun at die faster because the bullets that do hit, which are outside of my control almost completely because of the accuracy stat, will kill them faster. That's a bad balancing decision. That's a bad difficulty decision because those things are not in my control. So balance equaling fun is something that is kind of universal. It's not just to Dead by Daylight, because at the end of the day, what makes something fun is whether or not things are in your control, or at the very least, that's a huge part of it.
Here's the thing, though. That's valid. Your fun matters. It's a damn game. If you're not having fun, just stop playing it. Like, if you're not having fun, don't play the game. It's not a fun game. If you feel like it's not funny, or just go do something else. Here's why that's kind of clever, though. The fact that we have more or less replaced the word balance with fun. If you really sit and think about it, if a game had this one element in there, like maybe this one gun, or like there was just something that you could do, and it just broke everything and insulted all the nuance of the game, all the game sense that you had built up, and you never got to have that fun match where you really got tested, you'd be like, no, that's just not fun for me. It's not fun that the op has 10 rounds in the magazine. That's not cool. This isn't fun. I'm gonna stop playing. So balance being fun is the exact same thing. Honestly, it makes a lot of sense. It's fun. It's engagement. If it's not very hard to understand why we chose that. I mean, like, imagine if the rules of chess, it was a valid move for me to just flip the board over any time that I was losing. Be like, well, that's just the way you move, dude. I'm sorry. They didn't abandon the rules here. I can flip the board over any time I would like. You'd be like, hey, this sucks. That's not very fun. Let's not do that. That's an overpowered move right there. I don't like that. I'd be like, you know what? I agree. Let's not do that. Let's have a fun time playing chess, why don't we? So balance equals fun. We decided to just replace the concept of that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. It's probably the only thing that we can really do. It's not fun to get killed by blight 10 times in a row. It's not fun to get taken out by a nurse, Like, it's just not fun. It's not fun, and it makes me not want to play the game. I understand completely. Okay, there is a problem, though. There's kind of a big problem. Because everyone has vastly different ideas about what fun is, we run into all of these problems with Dead by Daylight, and then the DVD community bloviates, and they go on Twitter, and they complain, and they write all these tweets, and this is overpowered, and this is overtuned, and this needs to be tweaked, and we blah, 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 right here. It's all this nonsense. I mean, we're making no salient point. Adding an extra palette to some map somewhere is not going to just be the final brushstroke in this magnificent painting of balance that we all couldn't see until the final moment. That's not how it works. So when all these YouTubers and streamers, when they drone on and on about this is too broken, that's too busted, this needs to be nerfed, that needed to be nerfed a while ago, and the community listens to them, and then the community listens to them, and they begin to espouse and spout those stupid opinions as their own, despite the fact that those players who now have a fancy new opinion to show off to everybody never once stopped and thought to themselves, hold on, wait a minute, is this actually true? Do I really think this thing should be nerfed? Is this really as overpowered as I thought it was, or am I just kind of agreeing with someone who maybe I should try?
This is actually something that I've touched on a bunch of times in the past. I hate the I fucking hate this word, but it's the only one I can think of. I hate the sheeple mentality of people with their favorite content creators. I've actually seen this happen within my own community before as well, which frustrates the ever-living fuck out of me. Do not, listen to me, do not ever take my opinions and tout them as your own just because I said them. Please, for the love of God, give my opinion some thought. I would literally rather a community of people who disagree with me at every turn, because they have thought about what I'm saying themselves than a community who just blindly follows my word. And it's, you know, what Johnny's saying here, what I'm saying here is not that you can't agree with your favorite creator, or you can't take the word of your favorite creator on something that they know more about than you, but more of, if you're always going to constantly just agree with what a creator is saying without any thought into what they're saying, then it's kind of just a bad approach to thinking about the game, of having opinions about the game. Yeah. Also, I'm sorry for like the really bad frame rate. I don't know what's going on with my OBS. I think I'm gonna restart my computer after I film this.
Try and see if I feel similarly about it. This is also broken and overpowered and it's too strong. But it doesn't matter, because like, at that point they're just going to run away and they're going to spout off all these opinions that are not their own, of just somebody who they trust more than themselves to be right, which, I mean, they're not, because you can't be right about what is subjective about fun, because it's a very subjective thing. Like, it's fun. It's like, how do you define that, you know? Is it going to a water park? You know? Like, is it having your genitals played with? I don't know. Some people it is. Is it having your genitals played with at a water park? That sounds kind of fun to me, but like, I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. Okay, so in DVD, it's an imbalanced game. We've established that. Well, how and why is that bad? If Dead by Daylight is massively imbalanced, which it is, the top most skilled players suffer the most, and I will explain. Dead by Daylight is complicated. It's hard like me right now. There's a ton going on and so many things to manage and micromanage. There's all of these weird perk synergies and map layouts and counterplays. There's all these different little killers with unique powers, and there's all these 20 different add-ons for those powers that kind of change the power in some fundamental way that you've got to be familiar with. It's a ton. It's a lot to take in. The new player experience sucks. It's complicated. It's way too much for someone who just wants to like sit down and play a damn game after they've been at college for 3 hours and the brain is fried, or they work a job all day and now their muscles are sore and they just want to relax. It's a lot to ask of them. Like, hey, here's a new killer just got released. You have to remember the counterplay, and if you do a palette, you have to play it just like this, you're gonna hit, like, you know, it's a lot for them, and they're gonna get frustrated pretty easily, pretty simply. Yeah. And it goes on in the ways in which Dead by Daylight is complicated. But here's the problem: it just keeps getting more complicated. All of the content that they keep adding to the game is adding these layers of complexity to it. Every time a new map is added, it's complexity. Every time there's new perks added, that's complexity. Every time that some new element gets added, that some basic mechanic gets added or tweaked or whatever, it's complexity. But here's the problem, though: it practically has to. Dead by Daylight is forced to put out amounts of content almost faster than the average player can keep up with it, because new content drives new player engagement. That's why we've been seeing so many cosmetic collaborations. It's new content that doesn't add complexity. That's the big thing. And of course, new content equals growth, growth equals money, money equals good, the game can live a little bit longer, but more importantly, replenishes the veteran players who keep quitting Dead by Daylight, because that's the big thing. The veteran players are just getting cycled out. They're getting cycled out in favor of new ones. The new ones will stick around, then they will stick around long enough to become veterans, at which point they get bored and mad at the...
But this is the life cycle of a live service game in general. Right? I feel like a lot of times whenever people talk about, oh, well, the veterans don't want to stick around anymore and that's a bad thing. And I agree to a certain point. I think you should always be trying to make your veterans happy, because they are the ones that built your game. They are the ones that made your game where it is today. But this is just the life cycle of live service games and content creation around live service games as well. Every single live service game eventually has its titans fall off in favor of new people coming up in the content creation game. And while some of the titans will stick around, right, while some of them will stick around for years even, there's always going to be an ever continuous cycle of old creators falling out with new creators coming in and taking the mantle and taking what was once the spot of the old titans of the game and the content creation there within. Even myself, as somebody, I hate talking about myself in any positive light, because I always feel like such an asshole, but my growth within the DBD community is fucking unprecedented. I have been making videos on this game basically for about a little over a year, not quite like too much over a year. I've been releasing a new video every single day for this game for a combined total of about 11 to 12-ish months. And I went from, this channel was, this channel just celebrated its 1-year anniversary of being a YouTube channel. And I was at, when I first started making DVD content, I was at like maybe 100 subscribers, and I'm at 6,200 as of making this video, with it growing every day exponentially. I eventually will become, I eventually will become a titan in the DBD community. Probably, right? And eventually, I'm even working toward it right now, I'm going to fucking step away from Dead by Daylight. And somebody else will take my place. Someone else will come in with discussion content that fills the void that I left. This is just how live service games work. They're ever growing and ever changing. And I don't dislike complexity. I think complexity is fine. That's why I've actually been really addicted to the game Deadlock recently, Valve's new MOBA shooter, because it's fun. It's complex. I'm learning a lot. I've actually been winning more games recently because I've been learning how to properly play the game, and you know, it's just something new and exciting for me. And eventually I'll fall out with that and I'll move on to something else, because the attention span of the common person is just this ever rotating door, right? So Apex Legends recently fucked up big time with their battle pass thing, and a lot of Apex creators moved on to either Valorant or Overwatch. But in their place, a lot of Overwatch in their place, a lot of people have risen in the Apex scene. And the people who have risen in the Apex scene, some of them came from Valorant and Overwatch. So like live service games actually end up like tossing back and forth content creators, right? Like there's this really weird cycle where like content creators from one game will move to another game, while the content creators in that game will move to the game before. You know what I mean? So like this is just, this is not a Dead by Daylight inherent problem. And I actually don't even think that it's a problem. Like I said, you do want to keep veterans around, but I don't think that inherently the game is meant to, I don't think that inherently the game is meant to keep the retention of everyone forever. At some point, new people need to come in. At some point, old people are going to get burnt out and drop off, right? And that's not a bad thing.
The easy and kind of shallow meta that hold your hand way too much, which is exactly where it's at right now. And then they quit because they keep kind of just making all these easy little changes for the game to make sure that the new player experience is enjoyable. And then those new players stick around, they keep playing the game, and they become veterans too, and the cycle repeats. So there's a problem. DVD desperately needs to retain new players. The game is so imbalanced that at the highest levels, everyone is miserable. Playing killer Max and Mario is so goddamn boring. Everybody plays exactly the same. They all bring the same perks. Half of them don't even want to be chased. They just rather stealth around the edge of the map. And so the killer has nobody to chase, which isn't fun. Most of the time, it's temperature generators trying to chase shadows. They just skulk around while their friends do gens. There's lots of stealth, lots of shadow step, lots of lucky break. It's terrible. Most killers I know don't even really want to play anymore. The Twitch directory is literally just a sea of thumbnails staring at generators these days. That's all it is. I scroll down to that directory. It's like Survivor, Killer, Survivor, and it just keeps going down and down and down. Survivor. There's a few outliers here and there, but for the most part, it's just Survivor mains these days, dude. And Survivors usually say the same thing. This game is boring. Everyone plays the same. It's the same exact killers. They always can't penalty slugs. So if you suck, my teammates are bad. Killers always force stack slowdowns. No one's happy. I understand. We're not happy. So if the veterans who have played this game have spent hundreds of dollars on cosmetics and dedicated thousands of hours of their lives to this little dress-up simulator, and they used to love it, and now we're all bored and we don't want to play anymore, what does that mean? Well, that means that the good players will leave first. The ones who face the most imbalanced bullshit the most and feel like their time is not being rewarded with fun will go and play any of the other good games that already exist and are established and can actually have balance. So behavior needs new players. New players are going to join, and the ones that stick around, it's a cycle, by the way. It's the new player cycle. And if they stick around long enough to become the veteran with thousands of hours, the veterans will get mad at the increasingly convoluted and unfair meta, which is only going to add with each new content drop even more complexity. They're going to become bored with the game, and they're going to leave, as they do. DVD will continue to partner with any and all weird licenses, no matter how much they don't fit in the game anymore, and eventually it'll all lead to a breaking point, but I don't know when that's going to be. This is just going to kind of be the fate of all asymmetrical games. Balance needs symmetry, and asymmetrical games can never achieve true balance, which is necessary for the longevity of games to retain players. Yeah, it's the only business model that behavior can really follow, and it's not sustainable. The game just needs rapid new player adoption, and so the game will be increasingly tailored to that experience, despite the fact that with each new content drop that is not cosmetic in name, adds a layer of complexity that makes the game now harder, which will then require more balance at the top end, which will then, of course, spiral into the game is going to be very hand-holdy and very limited, which it already is because it feels like half the matches everyone's just on autopilot, and it's just boring. It's also damn boring these days if you're really good at the game, And if you're having fun with it, that is awesome. You are part of the.
I think this has to do more with the idea that the game is restrictive in what is good. And this is an inherent problem with Dead by Daylight that I feel like Johnny and I could come together and agree on. And I feel like many people can come together and agree on is like a massive problem where the game is so restrictive in what is good. The devs have this really annoying habit of anytime something is really, really good or really, really fun even, they just come in and they strike it down. I did an entire video, I've done several videos at this point about the removal of skill expression from the game, but behavior has this like really stringent way they want the game to be played, and so even though they release these creative perks and they release these interesting ways to play the game, they actively discourage you from playing the game in those ways by completely and utterly adding some of the most brain dead shit in the entire world. I haven't made an entire video on the 70-second hook timer because I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to phrase what I want to say without coming across as an entitled I'm better than all of you type of dickhead, which some people would argue I already do, but that's not the point. But basically, the 70-second hook timer has broken the game in a really bad fundamental way. And it's broken the game by creating more hand-holding. You guys remember what I was talking about earlier with noob proofing in Elsword and how that made the game miserable? This is what Johnny's talking about. This game has become so noob proof in a lot of shit that it's now making the higher levels miserable because all of the best shit is just abusable. So everybody's abusing the best shit, the best strategies, the best perks, the best maps. And the changes that need to happen to this game need to happen on such a fundamental level that they're probably never going to happen. And this is less of a, at least for me, I don't know about Johnny, but for me, this is less of a call to action, like, hey, behavior, you need to change everything now, as it is a venting of the frustrations that happen when you are at this point in your lifespan of playing a game. Despite only playing this game since October 2022, I am at over 2,100 hours. That is well over 1,000 hours a year, which doesn't seem like a lot until you remember that the average person plays video games for like 1 hour a day, right? 1, maybe 3 hours a day, if that, right? Most people don't have this kind of time. As a content creator, I have a vested interest in dumping this kind of time into the game. I have achieved in 2 years what most people take 3 to 5 to achieve. Do you understand how batshit insane that is? And so with someone like Johnny, who's very obviously been playing for a long time, some of the clips in this video are from Space Billy from a very, very long fucking time ago, you know, before my time. You know, somebody like Johnny, they've been playing the game for so long. I mean, even Otz looks like he's burnt out on this game, making Elden Ring content and Slay the Spire content. You know, he's trying to branch out into other stuff, because realistically speaking, playing one game every fucking day of your life, even if it's for your job, is just not a fun goddamn time. And so more creators are trying to branch into that variety. And again, this is a frustration with Dead by Daylight from people who have played the game so much that it's becoming frustrating. And like Johnny said, it's a vicious cycle. Eventually the new players will have enough time in this game that they're going to get to these upper echelons, they're going to know how the game works, and then every fucking game is going to feel the same. Every game's going to be miserable. And that's just a sad reality, unfortunately.
The group that has not yet reached burnout, but it's like, it's there somewhere. So I myself am looking at all these new fantastic games that just keep coming out, and I'm excited. I'm moving on, but Dead by Daylight, so long. Thanks for all the fish. And a very special thank you to my friend SlushyTTV, whose channel I will have linked in this video and the last video, for making the thumbnails for them very generously. Slushy, thank you tremendously. Guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
So, so yeah, this is pretty much Johnny's just kind of announcement that he is quitting Dead by Daylight content, which I love for him. I love that he's able to do it. Unfortunately, I'm not. I've talked about this in several videos. I've talked about this on Twitter. Right now, Dead by Daylight content is what pays the bills. I'm trying to provide new content to this channel slowly but surely. I'm like drip feeding this variety content to just like jumpstart that concept that eventually the only things that are going to be I'm going to be talking about in Dead by Daylight is the only thing I'm going to be talking about in Dead by Daylight is you know, like new killers when they come out, and that's about it, right? Like I eventually want to get to a point where Dead by Daylight is just not my main content, because I don't want a main game. I don't want that anymore. And I haven't wanted it for a long time. Even when I came back to Dead by Daylight, I didn't want Dead by Daylight to be my main content, but unfortunately at the time, you know, I had been on a 3-month break. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could come back to it, and just the same shit happened. The same shit happened where I'm not quitting Dead by Daylight content yet. I literally can't. I have to pay the bill somehow. But at the same time, it's just literally one of those things where I genuinely feel like the game just isn't isn't fun. It's the community is miserable, and they go out of their way to make everything else miserable. Every game is the same fucking thing over and over again. It's the same fucking play style. There's no room for creativity. There's no fun for there's no fun to be had, at least not in my opinion. You know, it's just such a miserable fucking experience, and I can't take it anymore. And other veterans can't take it anymore. And if you're new to the game and you're like, oh, you guys bitch too much, then you know that eventually you're not going to be able to take it anymore. But yeah, so that's my thoughts. That's the myth of balancing. That's the, you know, a couple of other things included with it. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you want to see more videos like this, where I kind of like take someone else's video and add my own thoughts into it, then let me know. Although I don't think there's going to be a big need for that. And even if you do want more videos like that, I don't think that I'm going to do them, so I don't know why I asked, but do let me know what you think about the discussion down below. I'd love to read your comments, and as always, a great big special thank you to my channel members listed on screen now. If you want to find out how to become a channel member today and get awesome perks like seeing videos early, merch discount codes, and more, then please click that join button down below. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Need more Kaiser in your life? Well, I've got you covered. Check out my second channel, The Kaiser Extras, where I upload full gameplays, stream compilations, me reacting to your Dead by Daylight clips, and more. We also upload a daily short with all the greatest clips from stream. We'll see you over there. Link is in the description.